Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to an impromptu Tuesday Rangers Review afternoon briefing. Nothing to do really with us today. We're here with our good friend Adam Thornton from the Hearts and Hands podcast, who, as everyone will know, has a book out called Gerrard's Blueprint. And we're going to chat a little bit about it, the inspiration behind the book, the content of it, why it's not just for nerds like me and you, Adam, amongst other things. So firstly, Adam, for those that don't know you, why don't you introduce yourself a bit? Obviously, you've been involved with the website as well as Heart and Hand. Give us an introduction to the book and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'm Adam Thornton, obviously. I've been involved in Heart and Hand for about 5 years. Most of that has been spent working, doing a podcast with Ali Bain, focused on Rangers tactics. So right through from January 2018, straight through to present day, essentially. We don't always do it every week now, but back then we absolutely did for at least 2 or 3 years. And I just thought there's a story here anyway in terms of winning 55 and getting back to the top in Scottish football, but I felt like there was a tactical story that needed to be told as well, and we've tried to do that in the pods. And then obviously with lockdown coming, and there was a lot of downtime. I was reading a lot of books. For anyone who maybe knows him on Twitter or for anywhere else, Lee Scott on Twitter has 3 excellent tactical theory books, one on Guardiola and Man City, one on Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool, and then one on Marcelo Bielsa and Leeds. And they really delve into the tactical theory of those 3 managers and those 3 teams, which was a really good read. So Lee was the inspiration, I guess, behind doing this book. I sent off a few articles I'd done before, a few kind of draft structures to a publisher, and they were really happy and told me to go ahead with it. So it has been a long time coming, Josh, as I'm sure you know. I actually finished the first draft of the manuscript about 2 weeks before Gerrard resigned, which wasn't ideal. We then agreed to delay it for I think 3 or 4 months at that point. Gave me a bit of time. Obviously, I had to change everything from Gerrard as the manager to Gerrard was the manager and all that sort of stuff. But I think it probably works out better that way because it's a factual thing now. I'm not delivering a book that's incomplete, if you like. Has been gone for more than a year. And that evolution that the book is about is primarily that 3-year journey the entire club went through during his 3 full seasons. So it's been a bit of a trial to get here, but that's kind of the story up to the point of publish, I guess.
Yeah, and I should just say, folks, that the link to buy the book is in the description, which is obviously in the description of the video, so very accessible. I've got it. I've read most of it. I've actually read it from draft, maybe trying to think a few months ago anyway, Adam, and I would heartily recommend it. But as I was saying in the intro, Adam, one of the things that stands out in this book, and everyone who's watching this video will have read lots of football books. It's not just a tactical theory, and that's probably quite important to distinguish, isn't it? This isn't just a book for people who want to know the evolution of James Tavernier's overlaps or how Kemar Roofe improved the front line and provided goals. It also tells the story of the emotion of that title as well, especially in a season where it was so heightened because no one could be in the ground. Do you want to speak a little bit about that and kind of give us a holistic view of the story?
Yeah, definitely. So I think you're absolutely right. The first maybe 70 pages are introducing the tactical philosophy, absolutely. But that's not even a third of the book. Looking at the kind of influences that maybe Gerrard had. He spoke a lot about how Gerard Houllier and Rafa Benitez were really big influences on him from his playing days in terms of how to set up a team. We've obviously got a huge part of the book which revolves around Michael Beale and his coaching philosophy and how he improved the training and also the players. And we dip into the management team, all of them: Gary McAllister, Scott Mason as the first team analyst, Tom Culshaw for the defensive side of it. So we go through and introduce all of them and what they brought to the team. And then we talk about sort of setting the tactical vision. What are you wanting to do? What's the team? What's the club that you're coming into? Are you coming into a club who expects to win? The fans want them to dominate the ball. Are you better than X number of teams within the league? All of that kind of has to be taken into account when you're building a tactical vision as far as Michael Beale is concerned. So there's a lot of that we go into in that section. Talk a little bit about absolutely the theory, how we Rangers set up out of possession, how they set up in possession, and then quite a lot on mentality and character, which is quite important, as you mentioned, Josh, during that kind of COVID time. That extended break from March to August was pretty, well, as unprecedented. I don't think there's been as big a break since maybe the Second World War. And it really gave the coaching team the opportunity to work with the players, whether that was in Zoom or even smaller groups in training due to the close contact stuff, that they wouldn't really have had time to do otherwise. So they're able to work on individual improvements, tweaks, etc., that you just don't get the time to when you've got such a hectic schedule. So the first part of the book is all about that. But then as we move through, as I mentioned, there's an evolution piece for me. So you've kind of got that. Where do we start with, first of all? So the last game of the previous regime, people will remember, was the 5-each game against Hibs, where Jimmy Nicholl was the caretaker manager. And some of the names that are on that, in terms of the starting lineup, Russell Martin and David Bates as a central defensive partnership. I think it was a midfield three of Sean Goss, Jason Holt, Jordan Rossiter, and Jason Cummings was up front. So no disrespect to what's came before, but when you compare it to 60 days later, Gerrard's first game against Scoopy, I think basically the only three players that survive are James Tavernier, Daniel Candeias, and Jamie Murphy from the starting 11s, certainly. So there is a big overhaul in that first summer. So we look at that, the impact of it, what that meant for the squad, the additions that came in 2019. Obviously, Philip Helander coming in, Borna Barisic really nailing down that left back role. How does that change how Rangers defend on the left? How does it change how they attack on the left? What does having two left footers there mean for building attacks and possession? And then moving into 2020, the introduction of guys like Calvin Bassey, John McLaughlin, Kemar Roof, Yanis Hadji. All of these players coming in, what did they give the team? How did they? What were they about? What was their type of skill set? So that's the second half, really. That evolution of how the formation has changed. If you remember way back at the start, it was a pretty basic 4-3-3. After Alfredo Morelos got sent off at Parkhead in March 2019, we decided to move to those famous or infamous twin 10. Ryan Kent moving in field. We had the kind of flatter midfield three as well that came in that was more solid with Davis, Kamara and Jack. So just chatting through those at a high level forms the kind of second half of the book, or the second part of the book, I should say. And the last part is just all about the players. I really wanted to make it about the players rather than just this is how a defensive midfielder plays or this is how a striker plays under this system. I think the players are the biggest part of the story for me. We can talk about the manager, we can talk about the coaching staff, but the players always have to be the star of the show. And I think the players that we've had, Stephen Davis coming back, for example, giving us something different to Ross McCrory at the base of midfield. Candeias leaving, being replaced by guys like Joe Aribo on the right-hand side of the attack. Differences between Morelos and Lafferty playing or what Kemar Roof brought into the team. The evolution of existing players like Morelos, like Tavernier, even like Borna Barisic in terms of the evolution that they've went through in the team. That all forms the kind of the third part of the book. And we go through each position and talk about the players that were in there in terms of what they did. And then key moments as well, Josh, like key goals, for example, within games or key moves or certain aspects of games. There was a game in September 2019, I think it was. We beat Aberdeen 5-0. And that was us kind of starting to get to grips with breaking down the low block, looking at positional rotation. I think Scott Arfield and Greg Stewart that day played as right-sided central midfielder and right-sided attacker, and they were very, very good in terms of rotating and moving a position and dragging defenders and creating space. So all those types of little touchstones or evolutions are within there as well. And just for fun at the end, we pick up on the signature goals. We've got 5 signature goals in there, just that really display what I think the team was about. We've got that infamous set piece, a Rebo flick on at the near post, and whether it's Morelos hitting it in at the back post or whoever it is. And we've got a kind of counter-attack. We've got Tavernier appearing at the back post. All those sort of goals are in there just so that people can have a look. And they're all illustrated wonderfully by a guy called Matthew Wood, who I got in touch with at the start of this year, who's done lots of illustrations. You probably know him from Twitter. He does a lot for football teams, mostly around lineups, etc. But he kindly helped me out by, I think it's about 50 drawings that he'd formed, which range from proper tactical theory drawings in terms of Rangers press, how they attack, what the pen triggers, etc., are, through to just lineups. This was the lineup on this day that we recorded this famous win, and then kind of passages of play and goals. So it's all in there. There's quite a lot to get through, but that is a kind of whistle-stop tour of the three parts of the book, if you like. Part 1, philosophy. Part 2, evolution of the formation and the system and players that came in to adapt that. And then part 3 is the tactics and the player evolutions by position.
Lots to dig into, Adam, and I think me and you literally could spend all day talking about it.
Probably, yeah.
Try to not give you all of my thoughts. I think it's a really interesting point, referencing the length of time that Rangers had before the 55 season. It's been a narrative this season as well with Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, who didn't really have time on the training pitch. And I think often people don't maybe fully appreciate what that means. But if you take this 3-month period that Rangers are in at the moment,
yep.
game recovery, there's just not the ability to reset or, I guess, bed in a playing style, which Gerrard was afforded in that time. I want to go into the 3 sections, but I just want to ask you a question as well on Michael Beale and Steven Gerrard, Adam. Obviously, it's quite an easy accusation to make against Gerrard at the moment with Beale not there, that, you know, he's the brains, and I'm sure that's something that Beale has refuted as disrespectful in the past. I think, my opinion on this is that what Steven Gerrard did was actually very wise as a young manager, taking experts around him, build a team around him, a management team around him, and not try to come in and say, I've not been a coach for 20 years, but I'm going to be brilliant at this in a year.
Yep.
Is that a fair way of looking at it? Because as much as Beale was maybe really influential in the in and out of possession stuff, it's Steven Gerrard that created this team as the figurehead, and ultimately he's the manager that bears the criticism and the good ultimately at the end of it.
I think it is. And from what we know, Neil Critchley, who was appointed, is every bit as highly thought of as Michael Beale was. He left the Blackpool manager's job after 2 good years there. I think he got promoted, didn't he? But he left the Blackpool manager's job to go and be Aston Villa first team coach. So someone as highly thought of as that going in, I think speak volumes. But yeah, it's a difficult thing. Obviously, Steven Gerrard isn't doing too well just now. That's maybe an understatement, but it's a completely different ballgame. I think people forget that. I think you think we can just lift and shift that coaching team, or we bring Michael Beale out and someone comes in and things will be completely the same. There's a lot behind the scenes there. Moving from Rangers, where you have so much of the possession, you've built a style that fits that, to then be going down to the Premier League, where you don't have as much of the ball, and you maybe need a little bit more in transition, or you need a bit more attack wise. I think can cause a bit of an issue. So how he adapts to that, I think, is interesting. I mean, there's no doubt Michael Beale leaving, there will be some sort of adaptation period needed, given that he was the first team coach with him for 4 years, full 4 years pretty much there, so there will be, but it's not as simple as that. And I think Gerrard is a lot cleverer than people give him credit for in terms of the tactical side of it, but we'll have to wait and see how that goes. I don't think it's as easy as, okay, Michael Beale's left, therefore things are going to fall apart, because Neil Critchley, from what I know, is very capable as well.
And he's also, the thing with Gerrard is people don't, I think, appreciate, he's a bit of people do appreciate he's an obsessive. He's a football obsessive as well. And, you know, how many times have you heard an interview with him and they kind of say, ask him about what he does in his spare time and just watch football. I'm pretty sure that he knows, you know, a thing or two, has picked up a thing or two tactically. And as you say, I just think it's important to distinguish that at the start. You'll be glad to know that you're getting some, what will I say, colourful comments from David Edgar, your good friend, who says, boo, shells, boo, whatever that means. In caps as well.
Oh, he must be angry. I'm surprised he's awake at this time, to be honest.
Game day. Right, let's get into the 3 sections then, Adam. I want to just kind of give this over to you. People are here to listen to you. Number 1, the evolution over the 3 years, both on and off the pitch. You speak there about the Aberdeen game, the change from the flat kind of traditional 4-3-3 to bringing the wingers inside almost by, I guess they were forced to do that to play around Jermaine Defoe in the first instance. Talk to me about the evolution over the 3 years from when Gerrard first came in to the end of the 55 season.
Okay, so I guess the evolution has to start somewhere. So where I started was the origins of that 4-3-2 formation. It's not a widely used formation. Obviously, people can talk about it as a variation of 4-3, and that's absolutely fine. But when you the level of detail that I like to do, Josh, I think it's important to distinguish the difference between a 4-3-2-1 and a 4-3-3. So essentially, like I said, 4-3-2-1 is, rather than playing two wingers, you play two number 10s behind a sole striker. The origins of that, it goes back a fair bit, but certainly the most famous ones are France, 90 World Cup, played a 4-3-2-1, and also the 2018 World Cup when they won both trophies. They did that with a 4-3-2. Carlo Ancelotti, who Michael Beale, I think, don't know if he worked under at Chelsea, literally, but he was definitely there at the same time, was a big proponent of it. At AC Milan, 2003-2007 Champions League finals are referenced in the book, and he played something similar. His view was probably not too dissimilar to Gerrard and Bale's, but his view was to get as many of his ball players in the team as he could. He had Kaká, Seedorf, Ambrosini. Getting them all in the team was key to him, and as time progressed into 2007, he started to introduce attacking fullbacks, guys like Cafu, and Jankulovski to get them the width that they probably didn't have as a result of moving to that narrower formation. So we have a wee look through that. It's a bit of a potted history of European football. There's obviously a Liverpool connection there as well that we know of, certainly at the start with that kind of flat midfield three and the three tight attackers. So we have a look at that and how that compares with their two attacking fullbacks. So that's all in there at the start. And then, as we mentioned, it just runs through what did the squad look like when Gerrard came in 2018, who was brought in, what impact did they have? Guys like, as I mentioned, Davis and Kamara coming in, how did that impact the midfield, which for the first 6 months or so was basically a combination of Ryan Jack, Lassana Coulibaly, Scott Arfield and Ross McCrory. What did those two guys do coming into the team? What did that give Rangers in that role? Into 2019, as I said, Helander and Barisic joining, Joe Aribo as well. How did that change things? Joe Aribo coming in as a kind of number 10, number 8, again, slightly different to maybe when Coulibaly or Ryan Jack playing as those kind of number 8s. What did that do to the team? 2020, Kamar Roof coming in, basically, I think is the bigger one there, and he finished top goal scorer that season. Him playing off the right rather than a kind of Aribo or an Arfields. What did that give the team? Goals, mostly. How did that work with Morelos? How did they share space? All that sort of stuff. So that, I guess, is where we are with that one. And I really wanted to show that evolution and just that understanding of, here is where we were at the start of the season. Here's the transfers that came in, because there has been a lot of criticism of transfers, but I feel like it's mostly focused on maybe the 3 windows previous to this one, so maybe the 2 Januaries and the summer this year. So this is all before that, if you like, where we did well. There were some missteps, guys like Eris Gresta coming in, but most of the missteps that didn't quite fit the style, maybe guys like Jordan Jones, Brandon Barker, etc., they were low cost signings, punts, if you like, to come in and add depth to the team. Pretty much in those first 5 windows, if you like, up until January 2020, we got more right than we did wrong. So how those players come in, how they evolved the formation, first of all, and then in the later chapters, how they evolved themselves as the formation continued to evolve. And that's kind of setting, if you like, the team level.
Continuing into part 2, which is similar, the most important, the incremental tweaks within those 3 years. So you mentioned Stephen Davis. I remember Stephen Davis, I think it was his first home appearance after coming back to Rangers. It was a 4-1 win over St Mirren. Could be wrong, but it was certainly one of his early appearances after arriving in the January. I think his first appearance was actually maybe away to Kilmarnock in one of those infamous 2-1 defeats that seemed to happen every 2 months for a while. I remember him coming off at 60 minutes that day. He played slightly higher up the pitch. And I genuinely remember sitting there thinking, what's he been brought in to do? Not understanding, because this didn't look like the Stephen Davis that as went on to have again fine years at Rangers. That stands out. I think later, I agree with you in the transfer market, because although Roof and Hadji can point to their minutes, the goals and assists that they got that season from that right-sided number 10 position were so important for me.
Yep.
You can go further back, as you say, to looking at the left-sided defenders. I remember a win against Midtjylland, away in Midtjylland, the 4-2 win, when you had John Flanagan still at left back, and Rangers are playing this asymmetrical system, and
Jones at left wing.
Yeah, and I think he actually had quite a good game. I remember Joe Aribo scored this goal, and you thought he's going to bang them in, but it took him a wee while to get his numbers up. Give me a few of those top level tweaks that, having gone back and watched these games and done your research, you think, do you know what, that was a really influential and important decision that they made.
So I think the big one for me happens in the 2020 season, and that's following the 0-0 against Livingston, maybe around about this time 2 years ago. If you remember, I think it was game 4 of the season. Ryan, Jack, Kamara,
is this the game, Adam? Is this the game where Stephen Jack? It was really waterlogged, or was that the 1-0 game? No, that was the 0-0 game at the start of the season.
The 0-0, right at the start,
at the end of the previous season. So this is when Kent had the chance at the end where he goes by all the players and he puts it just wide of the post, and it's fourth game in, and you're thinking, here we go again.
And we hadn't created lots. We had that flat midfield three still there. I think it was Jack Arfield and Kamara. It may have been Jack Davis and Arfield, but it was definitely Jack and Arfield. But there was so much criticism after it, in terms of, if you remember, this was right in the start of COVID. So at the end of the year before, obviously, Gerrard was, whether he was debating even or not, I think is up for it. Well, he certainly seemed to be in that press conference that he did after the Hearts defeat in the Scottish Cup. So while I don't think the Knights were out over that summer, I think everyone was probably a bit busier than with what was going on in the world. It was kind of do or die in terms of that season for a couple of reasons, which we won't get into, but that game in particular just looked like the kind of bad old days again, just passing about the midfield, passing about the back, no penetration, nothing like that. And he said himself, shortly after, I think we actually moved to a 4-2-3-1 formation for a little bit after that with Joe Aribo at the 10. But the big tweak for me was that change to the midfield, where he decided, I'm going to put Scott Arfield as a kind of free 8 or an attacking number 8, if you like. I'm going to have Joe Aribo coming back there at times as well. I'm going to have Yanis Hadji coming in there. We hadn't seen that before. It had basically been, as I mentioned, Jack, Davis, Kamara, Koulibaly, Ryan Jack, Ross McCrory. That was the kind of midfield option for the first 2 seasons, really. So bringing in those players, pulling them back, if you like, in a kind of hybrid role where they're a number 8, but they're going to drive forward, they're going to get in the box, was crucial. I think that was probably the biggest part of winning that title, if I'm honest, just that taking the handball in midfield, as Gerrard called it. Not dissimilar to what we're seeing with Van Bronckhorst now. Saturday was a bit of a bit similar there in terms of an omen, where he just has one sitter and 2 Tillman and Lawrence running as kind of hybrid 8s or 10s, depending on what position they are on the park. So that to me was a big change. You had Arfield and Hadji being able to link well. There was goals that spring to mind from Galatasaray, Hibs, Dundee United, those kind of third man run goals, like pass and move, and Arfield goes over the defence and Hadji finds him with the ball. That symbolised to me in that kind of period there, whatever it was, 8 to 10 games, that this is how we do it, this is how we win the league. So that's probably the biggest one for me. The other one I think would be the evolution of Morelos, I guess. So from that first season, how different he was maybe going into the second season. If you remember the games against Feyenoord, the games against Porto, this was really starting to come to the fore and dominate. So while we can talk about formation evolutions, etc., Morelos and Tavernier evolved themselves, evolved their positions on their own. They've been mainstays for Tavernier's case. What's that, 7 years? Morelos is 5 years. There's chapters on them where how they evolve themselves, how that position evolved, and how it interacts with the players. So for me, I would say that central midfield unlocking, and then the sort of evolution of Morelos and Tavernier, and the left hand side, that Barisic, Helander, Kamara, Kent quartet, if you like, how that changed the team. I think those are probably the three big points that I want to get across in terms of how the formation evolved as a result of those players.
And what about the forward line, which we've not quite touched on yet? The similar argument to earlier in this season, although it's very early, or sorry, the end of last season, Rangers needed more goals in the team, more goal threats, more players like, what Tom Lawrence and Malik Tillman look to be early on, which is players that just have that more of an inkling to get in the box, make those runs. Like Tavernier, who any chance ever he gets to get a sniff in the box, he's there. And that's one of the reasons why he's got all his numbers up, his instinct. We always hear about strikers' instinct. Talk to me about Kemar Roofe adding another player into the front line who scored 14 goals from open play that season, but could still fit into the system. And also Ryan Kent, who I can't remember his numbers off the top of my head, but they certainly improved that season. Rangers had goals coming from all over the pitch in the title-winning season because Morelos, it wasn't, maybe he got 12 and he had some time out injured and he came back towards the end of it. That was really important because before it was a lot of emphasis on Morelos to find the back of the net constantly, wasn't it?
It was, and it's not necessarily something that he is great at. In terms of that consistent streak, he will go through periods where he'll have a hot streak and go 2 or 3 months, but just as easily he could go through and have 4 or 5 games where he doesn't hit the net, and that absolutely causes an issue in the first couple of seasons when that wasn't happening, when Tavernier maybe wasn't on fire as well, there was nothing there. But then you started to bring in guys like, as you mentioned, Johannes Hadji, Kemar Roofe, Ryan Kent hitting that the number of goals that he did in that 55 season. Those are a result, I guess, of those players having that time to work on the pitch, just that cohesiveness that they developed, and the system that was created to give them the best possible chance. So it almost feels like we're kind of, history's repeating itself again. We're sort of back in that same situation for me 2 years later, where we're looking at how we've got these great players, but we're maybe over reliant on guys like Morelos, Kent, Tavernier again. How do we get more players into the team that can add goals? We've obviously still got all those players, Hadji, Roofe, etc. But getting in guys like Tillman and Lawrence while they're injured has been crucial. So I think you can't underplay it. For me, we haven't scored enough goals since Gerrard came in. Other than that 55 season, we need to score more. We need more goal scorers in the forward line. I know we disagree on this quite vehemently sometimes, but I think the change in Kent's position doesn't necessarily do him any favours as well, because not necessarily in terms of his play. I think in terms of his attacking output, it's possibly his finishing has been horrendous. There's absolutely no getting away from that. But I just wonder in terms of where he is on the park and when he's coming into certain areas, if he was maybe attacking from a more central area, if something might change there, or maybe on the right cutting in. He scored a lot of goals in that 55 season from a central position starting, but then drifting from the right in, because he's now on that left wing all the time. It sort of limits his options in terms of whether he can take a shot with his left foot or whether he can hit it with his right foot. So things like that, whether there's tactical reasons or not, they all work to absolute perfection in that 55 season.
Yeah, Kent's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you see his goal, well, he got 2 assists at the weekend, but the second one where it was quite a throwback. And I think this is what I was actually writing about this yesterday for the website. I think this is probably what Van Bronckhorst will settle on at home, where Scott Wright or whoever's on the right side and Kent are given that freedom at points to come inside. My view on Kent was always that, to go off topic for a second, when Van Bronckhorst first came in, that first game against Sparta Prague, and he pinned Kent out wide and allowed him to attack his marker with momentum, it was like a completely refreshed player from the player that constantly picked the ball up in busy areas and circulated possession. For me, to get the best out of Ryan Kent, you need to get him into areas of the pitch where he can isolate himself. And sometimes, against Ross County, that was central. Yep. So hopefully that's what we see going forward, because I agree, from wide left, he's just not going to get you many goals. I think there's definitely enough evidence of that. But he will provide, and I guess that's the opposite point. But that's a Tactics Talk podcast conversation, yes. Adam. That is. I want to talk, before we go on to the third part of the book, I want to talk about some more moments. The one that sticks out to me, I remember watching Motherwell, Rangers 3, Motherwell 1. It was after, what game was it after? It was after the St Mirren League Cup defeat, is that right?
Yes, yeah, it was,
Yes.
and everyone was concerned that the wheels are going to fall off, despite us being maybe 10 points behind and
Yeah.
10 points ahead in the league. I think at that point, yeah.
Yeah, and I was one of them, because when I was watching that game, I was watching it back home with my dad, and I just remember sitting there 65 minutes thinking, this isn't going to happen. This isn't going to happen, because there was so much evidence of that, so much scar tissue from before, from watching Rangers.
Yep.
One of the key reasons they managed to turn it round was that goal threat. Itten got one that day, and Roof got two. So a kind of a dual point here: the importance of having a deeper squad in that 55 season to go to the bench and increase the goal threat on the pitch. And with Roof anyway, we've just touched upon him. But also, what about those significant moments where Rangers did manage to, after the wheels came off the previous season, get the first Old Firm win of the season, get the second Old Firm win of the season when they played terribly in that 1-0 game, beat teams like
Yep.
Motherwell, go away and grind out results. The mentality that season was so strong. And I guess, as you are saying throughout this conversation, that's as important as any kind of tactical idea or whatever, because it's got to be carried out, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I mean, we've done that in the past where we've thrown on an attacker or a couple of attackers and just hope for the best. But I think that mentality point was huge that season. I think the 2-0 win at Parkhead really set the kind of bedrock of that. Obviously, we'd beaten Celtic at Parkhead the season before, but that, to me, when it was such a domination of a performance, I think that gave the team a lot of confidence in there, and it helped to build that mentality and character. And like you said, there were a few games in that spell pre-Christmas where we had to grind things out. I'm thinking there was a Ross County game, I think Kamar Roof scored, that was maybe only 1-0. And the Dundee United game where Tavernier scored the free kick. There's games in there that we had to grind things out. And even after January, like you mentioned, that 1-0 game, we weren't great. Callum McGregor own goal, but we got the win. We then went away and had to grind out wins against Hibs and Aberdeen, I think it was, away. I think Morelos scored in both of them, which to me, that I think the league was pretty much over after the Old Firm game, but certainly by the end of January, when you've been to those difficult grounds and you know you don't have to go again, and you're so far ahead in the league, I think that, to me, if you like, that 3-month spell between start of October and a 4-month spell, start of October and start of February, was where the league was won. And it is mentality and character. We talk about it, but grinding out those wins, I think, is one thing when you're not playing well, but the team were playing well. They were delivering on the tactical formation. They didn't lose their heads in those games, particularly that Motherwell game. We kept going at it. It wasn't necessarily aimless crosses into the box. We were doing what the manager wanted us to do. The style was there. Tavernier putting the ball into the box in the way that he does, but everybody was looking for the ball and trying to own what we wanted to do, take ownership. We're trying to get the win. So absolutely, you could argue that hasn't always been there, even under Gerrard and possibly under Van Bronckhorst. Domestically anyway, you could argue that that's sometimes been missing. But in that 4-month period, I think it absolutely came to the fore.
We're going to get to some questions because there's lots of good questions coming in here. So if you have asked a question, I will get around to it. I just want to finish off these points first. The final section, the point that you want to touch on, is one we've discussed a little bit already, Adam, but it's about the players, and it's how this isn't just about diagrams and charts on the wall, but it is about player evolution, how things have changed, what we're just talking about there in terms of mentality. When you look at player evolution, Morelos stands out. Obviously, Tavernier stands out. Structural things in the midfield stand out. What was the key influencing factors, I would say, from the previous season? Who really improved? Because I'm thinking back to James Tavernier in that season prior to the 55 season. Didn't have his best year. Kent didn't have his best year. Morelos obviously had his best spell and then tailed off quite dramatically. Connor Goldson against Hamilton that day, I'll never forget when that goal went in, and just the disbelief around Ibrox. What stands out to you in terms of player evolution?
I think the obvious one is one that we've mentioned is probably Tavernier. I think in terms of a specific player that has been there, I would argue that 55 season probably still wasn't Morelos' best. I think, like you said, the season before, that 3 or 4 months he had where he got, was it 30 goals he got before Christmas, or 29 goals he got
Something ridiculous.
before Christmas? That was his best individual season, and you can argue, and we have done on Tactics Talk, whether he has evolved in a good way or evolved in a bad way in terms of how much more he's linked up with the play, etc. How he's evolved as a player or what. But for me, I think it was Tavernier, and I think it was absolutely that that change from kind of just being a marauding, I say just, but being that kind of marauding fullback who was responsible for most of Rangers' attacking play, to then kind of evolve yourself to essentially be the team's chief playmaker in the middle of the park at times, was huge. You think about the goal against Galatasaray that we spoke about, where he then becomes effectively an inside forward on that right hand side, and Barisic swings the ball over and he's attacking the back post. I think for me in that season, his evolution there into what we see now as that pretty much all action could play anywhere on the right hand side and wouldn't necessarily look out of place. I think that was the big one in terms of a personal evolution. So that's in there. The chapter called Fullback Playmakers is basically around Tavernier mostly, but then we also have that kind of role evolution that I mentioned in the first season. John Flanagan in possession. The game that always sticks out to me is the Celtic defeat at Ibrox, September 2019. I think we lost 2-0, and we played John Flanagan and Niko Katic as the left two. And straight from the off, if you remember, Celtic kicked off and just kicked the ball into touch, and basically just tried to swarm Katic and Flanagan in possession, because neither of them were comfortable, and it's just really easy for them to defend. They pressed them into making mistakes. They pressed them into going back the way, which obviously lost us our train of thought. So that piece where Flanagan is the left back or Halliday's the left back, to then Borna Barisic coming in, what he gives us, what he gave us at that point in terms of where he could cross from, his interactions with Kamara and Kent, how he could receive the ball on his left and play it up the line if he wanted to, was pretty huge. I'm sure there'll be lots of people watching and listening who aren't a big fan of Borna Barisic right now, or think we could think that Yilmaz should be playing and we could improve on him. But at that point, coming from, if you like, makeshift left backs into having Barisic there was a big evolution of the team. So we chat about that. We chat about how the roles change points. There was a couple of games, the game at Parkhead I mentioned, the 2-0 game, and then also the 5-1 game at Motherwell, Josh, where we played the fullbacks maybe a little bit more withdrawn to deal with a back three that Celtic and Motherwell played. So we played them a little more withdrawn. We tried to get Celtic's fullbacks to come out, and we then used our fullbacks in possession to just cut round them. You remember the goal Jordan Jones scored against Motherwell, where Tavernier starts a little bit deeper. There's an interplay with Tavernier and Arfield. The ball gets played over for Jones into that space. So there's a lot in there about the fullbacks, as I'm sure anybody who listens to me will know. The fullbacks are very close to my heart, so there's a lot in there about them. As we've mentioned, the centre-back side, I guess, again, the evolution there of Niko Katic, what he gave us was warrior spirit and would header his granny to get the ball. But what Helander gave us there in terms of that left-hand side, again, people will probably say Helander, we have had better in possession than him. But at that point, moving from Katic to Helander was huge. And the one that always sticks out there, and it's in the book, is the Porto goal from Morelos, the 1-1 goal away, where Helander receives the ball from Goldson, lets it go across himself, and just plays this one-touch pass into the feet of Ryan Kent, who does a kind of round the corner pass to Barisic, and Barisic slides it through for Morelos to score that goal that we all love away in Porto. Wouldn't have been possible with Katic to be able to make that pass. So just those little changes, I think, in terms of the player and role piece, certainly on the kind of defensive side, I think are big.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, Adam, let's get through some comments and questions. Stephen says, afternoon, I'll be buying this for reading on my holiday coming up. Stephen, excellent choice.
Thank you, Stephen.
Ian says, sounds like this book is perfect for you, Josh. Ian, you're right. So thanks, mate. Stephen says, big shout out to his best mates, number one Gers fan, Scott and Ek. David says, this book sounds fantastic. And myself as an artist, I'm interested to see the illustrations. Brilliant stuff. Adam, yeah, can confirm, David, that they're excellent. I was actually thinking, Adam, earlier when you were speaking about the artist, that it's worth getting a little one of the mementos for the wall that you have, I know, in your home study.
Definitely got one. I've actually got one right here. If you want to,
here we go.
Want to see, so I'm sure people will know what this looks like rather than know maybe who it's from. But this is Matthew Wood's Champions poster that he did. So we kind of used this as the base. Obviously, I didn't want it to be Subbuteo Men. On mine, we've just got the kind of flatter circles, if you like. But that was the kind of inspiration behind it. When I got that, I ordered that from Matthew pretty much just as soon as we won the title. Sort of kept in touch with him, and he's helped me out with the illustrations. So they are, I mean, David will probably know more than me, but to my untrained eye, they're absolutely fantastic. So hopefully he enjoys them.
Yeah, Jim, good friend of the show, says fascinating memories. Yeah, it's long enough now to look back at it in hindsight, which is, I guess, maybe a silver lining of Gerrard going for you, Adam. Although I guessed in the first instance that was not what you were thinking.
Do you know, it's funny. It was a bit hectic at the time, as I said, when I delivered the manuscript, but ultimately that 4 or 5 months gave me a little bit of time just to, like you said, look back on it as it's not going to change now. It was a little bit stressful, I have to say, the kind of early months of last year when you're writing things, and then maybe like the Malmo result, for example, happened, and you're thinking, is this going to change everyone's opinion of this and that? So when he left, I'm thinking, well, what he did at Rangers can't change now. Certainly for those 3 seasons, It's fact. So I was able to just kind of put a bit of closure on it and say that's the 3 years. Everything is past tense. Nothing can really change there. I had the time then. I was running out of time, so I had time to get all the illustrations done. I was able to add a bit more depth with the delay, etc. So while it wasn't ideal, I think I was able to deliver a better book out of it, which is what I wanted ultimately. So that's it.
That is good. Teddy Bear says, always enjoy your views, mate. I presume he's talking about you, Adam, and not me. I missed the pod last night, but listened to it later, and I totally agreed with your call. So there you go. Right, a couple of questions here for you, Adam. Josh, can you ask Adam, when researching this, did he see any, I think that says significant. I thought that was a word I didn't know for a minute, and I was thinking, this is going to be embarrassing reading that out. Change in play style or attitude when the team had previously collapsed after the winter break, and maybe within that, Adam, if you could just touch on what happened after the 55 season. Why weren't things as good? There's the nuanced point of view from
that. The short answer is no. I guess in terms of there's a lot. I tried to dig as many quotes and references as I could, and you'll see them throughout the book in terms of Rangers TV extracts. Things from Michael Beale being at the coach's voice interviews, various other things he's done. I managed to dig out a YouTube presentation or a YouTube video that he'd done back in 2015 or 2016 when he was still at Liverpool, and he was over in NI, Northern Ireland, coaching, and he was talking about the kind of different types of midfielders that you get. So they're in the book in terms of, he gave them all names, which most people will probably be cringing at, but energizers and spiders in the web and all that sort of stuff. So I managed to dig out into quite a lot of that, but they're understandably maybe less keen to talk about things that haven't gone as well. I never spoke to anyone directly about the book, but I just mean in terms of in print, they're probably less keen to talk about it. I think all the chat at the time was nothing different had happened in terms of those winter breaks. They couldn't quite figure it out. To me, I don't know, Josh, if it's just as simple as, like we said, the depth of the squad. I did think at the time Europe was maybe having an impact in terms of the quality that we had in the team, the depth of the squad, the number of games we were having to go through. The first 2 seasons we had to play 8 games in Europe before you even got to the group stages. Possibly just a bit of burnout. I'm not sure. There was no kind of silver bullet on those. And then after 55, I guess that was very, very disrupted as well, wasn't it? There's all these kind of rumours about maybe not being backed and Gerrard possibly looking at exit doors, etc. at that point. So maybe all of that going on in the background, not getting the funds that he maybe thought he deserved, etc. That really, really, really interrupted pre-season last year. When you think about Morelos coming back late, we had players away at international duty, we had a lot of players injured, we had players coming back Sakala came and had to isolate. Morelos came back and had to isolate and missed the away leg in Malmo, I think it was, and he came back.
Yep.
I think he came back late and took a bit of time to get up to speed, as he's obviously doing again this year. So I think there's a lot of that. There's absolutely a piece there which is possible, but again, it's really difficult to quantify that. For a lot of them, they had won the title, and it was that big pressure that some of them had been there for 3 years, living with that pressure. Some had been 4, some had been 5, 6 in the case of Tavernier. But the pressure that possibly the club and the fans were under, in terms of it being a kind of 9 in a row season, and we hadn't won the league for so long, and just trying to get that over the line. Once that does get over the line, possibly there's a relief point there, as well as celebration, etc. There may have been a little bit of that. I don't want to say they down tools or they lost their hunger or anything, but it could be just when you get that natural high. You seen Liverpool the year after they won their title. Just that drop off, even if it's just 10-15% drop off that comes for whether it's a month, whether it's 2 months, whether it's 3 months. I'm not sure. I think there was certainly a combination of things for both the 55 post 55 summer, and if you like the 2 winter breaks or the 3 winter breaks before that.
Yeah, absolutely. A big thanks to Derek Gray, who's made a donation on YouTube. I didn't know you could do that up until now. So thank you, Derek. Thank you for the compliments on the content. We will try to keep up the good work. We're all working hard, as ever. Right, I want to... Oh, sorry, Adam, that's my phone going off. I want to ask one last question, Adam, before we wrap it up. And it's before we plug the book again. How do you look back on the tenure? Because obviously, you know, there's some, I guess, ill feeling towards Gerrard when he left in the manner, and at the time he did. But how would you, in 10 years, when you're speaking about Steven Gerrard's time at Rangers, do you regard it? I'm sure you regard it as a success, kind of mission accomplished. How would you sum it up?
I think most people will. I think there's a lot of. I don't blame anybody's viewpoint, but I think a lot of people would be having the mindset of, how dare you leave us, first of all, and then how dare you leave us for a club like Aston Villa? No disrespect to Aston Villa, but just in terms of what's success for Aston Villa this season, is it probably top 8? I think they don't look anywhere near that. But what is success? So there's those queries there on Gerrard's side. He'd probably argue that he's in a kind of higher. He's definitely in a more competitive league, and he's got this much more exposure there in terms of maybe what he wants to do in the future. Whether that's proven to be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess, remains to be seen. But for me, I just think about where we were when Gerrard came in, and where we had been for 6 years previous to that. Even the 2 years previous to that, when we'd stumbled through Warburton and Kashinya, and we were comfortably third in the league. For Gerrard to come in and his coaching staff to come in, the improvement, even without the tactics, but just the side of it, which obviously is my interest, just of standards and the introduction of sports science and all that sort of stuff, and those on and off the pitch standards that were raised by Gerrard, the European football that he got us, which we now just take for granted that we qualify for the league. We probably we shouldn't have been anywhere near it, really. I think we were the first team in. Was it the first team ever to qualify from the first round 2 years in a row or something like that? It just doesn't happen, and it hadn't happened. So 3 years in a row. I think that's the story. I think what people will look back on. Ultimately, yes, you can say should have done better, should have won more titles, should have won more cups, and I think certainly in the 55 season the treble was absolutely there, and we weren't able to grab it. I think if we'd have won that. And maybe nabbed that League Cup final in 2019, which is still a very, very sore point for everyone. If he'd have got to that, I think he'd have been remembered a little bit more fondly when he left. But ultimately, the 55th title for me is the most important in my lifetime, and him and his team delivered that. So I think he'll be remembered fondly, much more fondly in years to come than maybe people have been in the last, 8-9 months. Overall, I know there's a lot of people I speak to certainly that still have a bit of bitterness about it, but most people on the whole recognise that job where we were when he came in versus what he left us. And he did leave, absolutely, but you look at the squad that was left there, and it's not all Gerrard, obviously. There's Ross Wilson, there's Mark Allen helping behind the scenes, but you look at a lot of those players and they're all London affiliated players, which Michael Beale had a big hand in years ago in terms of development roles. And there's a lot of Liverpool related players. There's guys that are maybe coming to play for Steven Gerrard and Rangers.
Yeah.
I don't think we can underestimate the pool that he had and where he got us to. So while he might have left in a bad moment for us, I think what he left us with ultimately was a squad good enough to get to the Europa League final with a bit of tweaking and the improvements that Van Bronckhorst gave us. So yeah, I'll be forever grateful for that. Absolutely.
Well, Adam, this has ever been a fascinating chat. Great to kind of pick your thoughts on this. Pick your thoughts. Pick your brain. What's the saying?
Pick your brain. Get your thoughts. Yeah.
Whatever. Get your thoughts. Yeah. The link for the book is in the comments, folks. And as I said at the start, I would just really recommend that you go and read that, whether you've got a big interest in the tactical side, whether you've not, as hopefully we've been able to unpack throughout this podcast. There's something for everyone here. So link in the comments, link in the description to go and buy the book. Adam, if people don't know, where can they find you on Twitter? Is it Adam Ski or something like that?
Yes, you can get me at Adamski152 on Twitter. And if you order through the Heart and Hand website, I will give you a signed copy. Little bit of confusion yesterday on DMs, so I just want to clarify it. When I say a signed copy, unfortunately, it's a signed copy by me. It's not a signed copy by Steven Gerrard or Michael Beale, because there was a bit of confusion yesterday. People seem to want signed copies from me, so I've just been offering them as standard now. But just to be clear, signed copy, and you open it up, it's going to be my horrible scrawl. It's not going to be whatever Steven Gerrard or Michael Beale's autograph is. But yeah, just to make you aware of that.
Well, I hope mine is signed as well, Adam, because it's still to arrive. So if it's not signed, I'll be taking it to the iBox.
It is. It should be. Unsigned ones will be more valuable at this stage. I think pretty much all of them are signed. So yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much to everyone for joining us. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube. If you enjoy this content, head over to therangersreview.co.uk and subscribe. £2 for 2 months. I'll be joining you from Ibrox later as Queen of the South visit in the Cup. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and we'll speak to you later.